Here, let us take a moment and remember why we're here. And so if we can just go inward and just feel what's here, experience what's here. Like, what is here that is alive and holy? What is here that is radiant and divine? What's here beyond that mask that we wear? We know our mask, it's made of our personality, our body, our groovy hairstyle, or whatever it is. However we paint the mask. With glasses and a beard, or lots of makeup, or all natural, or whatever it is. But what is here that is innocent and pure, that's under the mask? What's here that's genuine? That's simple yet deeply profound. What's here? So if you feel into your experience, this quiet presence of divinity that so many of us, we just gloss over, we ignore, and place such a high value on our thinking mind. Like Mooji was saying a moment ago, he was saying that sometimes our mind, it develops a whole character, and that character starts attacking us. You don't have to listen to that character. You don't have to be victim to the character in your mind. If you want to be victorious over the ego, can you step back and see what is here that is innocent and pure beyond your ego, deeper than your ego? What's here that's always been here? It is so pure, so good, so radiant. And so I encourage you just to stay with this. This is the first rule of satsang, is to stay with your direct experience. Stay with what's here. Stay with that which is true, that which is divine, that which is holy about your experience. What is here that is awake, aware, alive? And so can you smile at this realization of the goodness that you are? And so from this space, let us explore these questions. So here's, everyone has all these questions for me, but I have a question for you. Are you living in your truth? Or are you hiding behind your mask? Do you know that it's okay to take the mask off and live life fully? Do you know that? Do you know that in the year 2020, we don't need a mask? Even though on the news there's all these people walking around with these masks on, afraid of the coronavirus. Can you give yourself permission to live without a mask? naked, carefree, innocent, connected with the fullness of what you are. And see that you don't need to guard, you don't need to defend. Unnecessary to hide behind the mask of ego. Completely and utterly unnecessary. And so, are you living in your truth? Or are you hiding behind a mask? Is it really that comfortable? Like truly, is it really that comfortable to hide behind a mask? Most people are addicted to hiding behind a mask. They cannot get out of their character. They say, oh, I can't do it. I can't leave my character. Sure you can. You can leave a character just like you can leave a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or you can leave someone at a bar and say, okay, I've had enough. When I was young, I used to go out, in college occasionally, and there was always a night in the evening when just things got really wild. I said, okay, I've had enough. Like, that's my cue to go home, just to call it a night. And so my question to you is, have you had enough? Have you had enough of that mask you're wearing? Are you willing to take it off and to live from the truth of what you are? And so that's my question for you. Please do. The world needs you. So here's a question, I believe, from Justina. She writes, Craig, can you please talk about how one can practice seeing the divine in others? Yeah, this is a great practice. This is a practice that my teacher, David, he received it from his teacher, Hilda Charlton. She was a great master being. And she told him, and I think, boy, she got this practice from like Nityananda in India, who was Muktananda's guru, a great master. Maybe someone else, I can't remember. But everywhere you walk down the street, everyone you see, you look at that individual and you say, like a mantra, this too is God. 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 And just try it. I've had a lot of people try it. And Justina, I know you work, as a counselor, as a therapist. So when the individual comes in, the first rule, that we must do as a healer, when someone walks in our office, we say, this too is God. I'm talking to God. I'm not talking to a broken human being, which is what most psychologists and healers do, and say, I'm now going to fix them. No, we look at them and we say, this is God. This is a child of the Most High. Their soul is God. Their soul is pure. Their soul is divine. We know that everyone's heart is good, truly. Now, they may have a big wound on top of their heart. That's their egoic heart. But I'm talking about their true heart is good. So you see the radiance in everyone. So Justina, a question for you is, can you see the radiance in everyone? The fundamental aliveness in everyone. Now, when I go rock climbing, I go out in the desert and there's these massive sandstone cliffs, that were big like lava plumes that came up, and then they cooled, really quickly, and they cracked. And so they make these beautiful just cracks that go up for hundreds of feet, and we stick our hands in those cracks, we climb up them, and but when I'm really struggling to get up those get up those cracks, those rocks, those cliffs, a lot of times I just stare at the beauty of that red rock, and it's glistening in the sunlight, and I see the radiance, I feel the radiance, the aliveness coming off the sandstone. So I'm inviting you to do the same thing with whoever's seated before you, whoever you see walking down the street. You know, I had a friend who I said, try this out. He was working a cash register in Israel. He thought, oh, no, that's a silly thing. It's a stupid thing. Craig, I can't do that. I said, no, why don't you try it out? He said, no, I don't like this idea, Craig. There's just old ladies coming in all day long. Try it, you know, with your people. Try it. Try it. And he did. He said after the first 20 minutes, he felt so blissful. You know, he was having trouble counting money at the cash register because he felt so much bliss, so much love for everyone. And the cash register is a fun place to do it because you're standing there and there's a stream of people. You know, you scan their groceries or whatever, but it's one after the next. So there's plenty of opportunity. If you live in a city, walk down the street and see it. If you live where I live, out in the middle of nowhere, walk in nature. Walk in the trees. Say, this too is God. This too is God. See it in the animals, in the deer. You know, the fox, the bear. This too is God. People are terrified of bears, but I've seen so many bears in my life, and they're like the most innocent creatures. You just don't get between them and their cubs, you know. But they have such childlike energy. They're such beautiful creatures, utterly beautiful. And if you ever see a cat, like a big cat, a mountain lion, or a lynx, or a bobcat, you know, they're just like pure muscle, pure strength, pure agility. When you look at them, you fall in love with how graceful they are, how strong, their power, their force. And so whoever's before you, just see if you can see that all is God. All is God. So say it, this too is God. This too is God. A lot of people try this practice, but on the first day they try it. You know, they try it with the hardest thing in their life, you know, like something bad comes and they say, oh, this too is God. And then they get this idea, God is punishing me. It's like, no, try it with babies and puppies and, you know, dogs. And, you know, if you have a kitty cat and it's your four-legged friend, try it with things that are easy first. Don't try it with your mother-in-law to begin with, you know, unless you have a great relationship with her. Try it with things that are easy and are people you don't know. You know, the problem with when you know someone, oftentimes the ego develops an idea, a story of who they are. So it's my egoic mask relating to your egoic mask. And oftentimes those masks are just guarding and defending and posturing, strategizing to get the upper hand, or, you know, in this day and age, it's to get the last word in. But try it, just try it with anonymous people and see. See the stream of life flowing at you. Flowing at you. Okay, so this beautiful question, Justina. So here's a similar one. Craig, I was wondering, someone told me ultimately the soul discovers it is God. All exist is God. But what exactly is God? And at first, I looked at it like we're all just one person or the same person, God experiencing itself. But I assume that isn't fully true. What exactly is meant by we are one consciousness, yet there is still you, awareness, and me, awareness? Isn't there the divine pure field of pure being? Excuse me. And all arises out of it? Someone told me pure consciousness, we discover we are an aspect of the totality or God. Okay, so so this individual's going back and forth about this paradox. And I think the question really gets to the heart of the paradox, because the truth is a paradox. So the truth is there is one God and we are all one God, one with God. But it's also true that God individuated herself in the form of you and I. And so this is the paradox. You know, I've had for months at a time where I've gone into states where I just felt like all I was the absolute emptiness. And I go into that for, say, 3 or 4 months. And then the next 3 or 4 months, I would go into the absolute nothingness, which is similar to emptiness, but a little bit different. And so then, after that, I would go into absolute love or absolute bliss or absolute spaciousness. And God kept taking me from one absolute to the next. And it was very ungrounding. It was very hard to function in the world as an individual. And so that's one experience of being the absolute. Another experience is showing up in the form of you, of your soul, your individual soul, which is different than your mask. So let's just clarify that real quickly. So the soul is the most essential aspect of your being. It's made of love, it's made of light, it's made of bliss, it's made of life force, prana. It's made of prajna, which is heart wisdom. It's made of spaciousness. So it's made of the essential qualities of God. Love, compassion, and peace. But it also has an evolutionary nature, and this is where people start to trip up. They say, well, how can something like that have an evolutionary nature? Well, because the creator of the universe can create any kind of being. And so God created this paradox of creating a being, all of us, who are one with the absolute reality, while simultaneously we're individuals. I mean, that's an amazing thing. An amazing thing. The individual only becomes a problem if you identify with, your individual ego, which is like a crystallized version of the fight or flight response. It's only a problem if you identify with the ego and then you fight against the totality of life. And so this question, are we, basically, are we the one, like the big one, or are we the small one, the soul? We're both, of course. And that's the paradox that we live. And from the beginning of time, people have tripped over this paradox. I was with a friend a couple of weeks ago, and I was, for one reason or another, I started to flash back into previous incarnations, and I went back to one of my first incarnations where I was a truly conscious being, and I saw myself, as this fella, like an African tribesman, and I saw myself just seated like by a fire, with these other tribesmen around me, like other shamans, and it was quite a wild experience because I can remember being this individual, the shaman, just full of energy, and simultaneously just looking up at the totality of the night sky, the vastness of the stars, the expanse of space. And if you can imagine the world before the invention of the light bulb and all the light pollution, like when I live in a great place for seeing stars, but when you go to, a place like California or the Midwest or Europe or most of the world, there's so much light pollution, you don't really see outer space. When you come out to where I live and you look up, you see the Milky Way. You see it. And I can remember just being this man and feeling the hugeness of my consciousness. And then simultaneously being this individual form. And I was going back and forth with this other shaman. We were like throwing energy at each other or something silly, just having fun as an individual soul, an individual God being, an individual God being. And this is, the invitation of this world is is, can you claim the hugeness of what you are? Because as you do, fearlessness arises. You don't live in fear anymore. Great weight and burden is lifted from your being. And then take on the character, take on the soul, and live through it. Don't be enslaved by it, but live through it. This is the invitation. And so, this is a greater question for you, my friend, is instead of, worrying about the philosophy of life, like which is true, are we the totality or are we the individual? Of course we're both. But a greater question is can you allow the totality to live through your individual nature? Can you invite the hugeness of God to come down here, now? Speak through you, live through you, love through you, walk through you, dance through you, heal through you if you're in suffering, heal through you. This is what our world needs. And when we die, we can go to heaven and we can journey through many heaven realms as a soul being, or we can dissolve into pure consciousness. Into pure consciousness. But while we're here on planet Earth, God has this idea of bringing the totality into matter so matter can wake up and live as a truth so the earth can one day become a heaven realm. And it's a huge order. It'd be great if we could just stop killing each other. God wants us to this realm to be a heaven realm. And for this to be possible, you step into the totality and then let it speak through your mortal frame and watch the world change. This is the challenge. This is the challenge. And so, I'm sorry I didn't write down who asked this question, but, a great thing, great practice I used to do as a little child is I would just lay and look at the vast expanse of the night sky, just feel the hugeness of this presence. And I'd lay there for a couple of hours or so. And then I would get up and I'd go grab my dog and I would take him on a long walk. And he was so happy to go on a long walk. After a couple hours of stargazing late at night, I could have went in and selfishly just went to bed. But I'd go inside and I saw my dog and he was just so happy to see me. I'd say, come here, Sam, let's go outside. Because see, this is the nature. The nature of vastness, the nature of peace. When you step into it, its response to life is compassion. You see a dog, all the dog wants to do is go on a walk, And as a kid, like at 12 o'clock at night, I wasn't going to go get in any more trouble. I looked at my dog, he was before me, I said, okay, buddy, let's go. And we'd walk out into that night. And just be bathed in that radiance. And so this is the challenge, is can you allow this peace, this emptiness, to show up in the form of compassion and love and intelligence. And so I better move on because there's a lot of questions here. Okay. Hi, Craig. Thanks for your offering tonight. I'd like to hear any teachings on making amends for past wrongdoing. As consciousness continues to open, grace is bringing forth deep shadow aspects of the psyche to be healed and liberated. All of the past wrongs done to others are surfacing deeply unconscious and in many cases shameful actions. Okay, so Wesley, I'm gonna stop you right there. So when you open up on the path and all these old pains and confusions start coming forward, if you have a strong internal critic, if you have a guilty conscience, which is different than a liberated consciousness. But if you have a guilty conscience, a lot of people talk about this. Somehow the Catholic Church aligned with having a guilty conscience. I never picked that up, but some people do. It's very deep in our culture. There's going to be this idea that, okay, if I see something wrong that I did in the past, I need to make amends. And, there may be some truth to that. Like if you harmed someone and you think, geez, they're still hurting from this, and you need to call them or send them an email and say, hey, look, I'm really sorry I did this. I was confused. I had too much to drink, I'm just kidding. Whatever it was, that was one of the jokes we used to say. I don't know what happened. I had too much to drink. The ego is full of excuses, but it's also full of guilt. It's full of shame. And it plays this dance of like, one, making excuses and then burying it. And then two, thinking that we need to, beat ourselves with a whip and punish ourselves. Most things, if they passed and it's been a number of years and we're not in contact with the people, they've moved on, we've moved on. We don't need to be calling everyone and saying, hey, I'm really sorry for what I did. And let me give an example. Yesterday I was just outside. I was working on my van, and I have this new project van that I'm turning into a camper, and I was working real hard, and I just started to feel this tension start to develop. I was wrenching on some stuff, and I was having a real hard time working an angle grinder, which is, throwing sparks and smoke, and I about cut my finger off, for a moment, but luckily I didn't. And anyways, I realized, okay, I just need to put all this down. And I just went and laid in the driveway. And I laid in the driveway, and I had some old memory of, something painful that had happened in my life. Maybe I wronged someone, maybe they wronged me. And I know, I just went with the experience. I just fell into it. I just laid there in the warm sun, and I just started crying. And I just let the tears flow. And a couple minutes later, I was just sitting there, and I was just feeling completely peaceful because it had released from my body, from my consciousness, from my nervous system. And so whatever it was, I can't even remember, but, I didn't need to go call someone and say, hey, remember what I did back in 1986? That time we were at the pool and I took my foot and I held you down underwater, like stupid things that boys do. It was like every day at the pool, someone was drowning, dunking me, and I wasn't ruthless like the other kids, but I'm sure I did it a couple times. I don't need to call that kid and say I'm sorry. There's a good chance that it'll just stir up more drama than is necessary. But when you release it in you, oftentimes it actually releases it in the collective. Oftentimes that's the case. Is when you let go of something deep, it just gets liberated. There's this thing that says, about the life of the Buddha. In the moment of his awakening, it says something like, when the Buddha woke up, the whole world woke up. The whole world woke up. And so as you wake up, Wes, as you let go of these pains, they're released, they're liberated, and the world wakes up. The world doesn't have to carry them. The world doesn't have to carry them. Sometimes it's helpful to have a heart-to-heart with someone. Sometimes that can be what's necessary. But my sense about this is your guilty conscience is taken over, and it's trying to give you something to do. You went on to say there is an urge to leave no stone unturned, an urge to reach out and apologize for all these past hurts. Many times when I've felt this pain or the brutality of life, I would just lay and weep, and I would just say, I'm sorry, to the sky. I would say it over and over. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And as you do, a great weight is lifted. In fact, one of the things that happened, if I go back to that past life memory I had, which is, I'm not a big past life guy, but I see him every now and then. But I was having this big release with a friend, and I started saying, I'm sorry. And as I did, the old pain was released. And then these greater truths were coming forward into my consciousness. And so, Wes, if you feel like there's someone you truly need to apologize for, go tell them you're sorry. Something recent or something really big, or send them an email. 12 steps is great at this, but it really wants you to look at, like, what are the big ones in your life? We don't need to go around apologizing to everyone. I've been a master at that, and people have told me, Craig, quit apologizing. It's fine, it's fine. What I encourage you to do is to feel, the deep energetic release, and imagine as you release that, that's the overturning of the stone. That's the liberation. That's what's necessary. And it truly is healing for all parties. It's a funny thing is, like, when you stop being angry at someone and then you walk into the room with them, you feel the energy of the room change, even for them, even if you don't say, hey, I'm really sorry. You feel it change. They know you're sorry because of the love in your heart and the sparkle in your eyes. Okay, so here's another question. This is from Charles. Hi, Craig. I feel as if I'm in a dark night of the soul. Wondering if I can survive the pain, the suffering, and the anguish. Yeah, Charles, this is how the dark night feels. But there's this basic teaching on the path of liberation. Just because something feels a certain way doesn't mean it is that way in truth. Just because something feels a certain way doesn't mean it is that way. When you're in the dark night of the soul, you feel like you're in living hell. You feel like you are in pain, suffering, and anguish. But he's saying, I'm wondering if I can survive the pain. I want to point this out right now, Charles. You are surviving the pain. You are, right here, right now. There is something that is outliving the pain. What is that? What's that thing that's outliving the pain right now? What is that is still awake, aware, alive, that's noticing the pain, but still has a beautiful and innocent heart? What is that, Charles? Can you place your attention on your goodness? The problem with the dark night of the soul is people tend to focus on the hell experience instead of the divinity that is outliving the hell. And by outliving it, I mean in each and every moment, you outlive the previous moment. There's something here that is awake and aware and outlives, whether it's chronic pain or with your situation, this terrible experience you're having, with family members. It's brutal. But there's something here, Charles, that will outlive this, that is outliving it. So right there in your question, I'm wondering if I can survive the pain. Yes, you can. You already are. You survived yesterday and the day before and the day before. Your innocence will triumph. And Charles, you have a heart of gold. So I encourage you to have faith in your heart, not in the pain, not in the suffering, not in the anguish. Have faith in your heart, your truth, your love, not in the pain. When you have faith in the pain, it sinks you. But it never really sinks us. You know, like even people in AA, they say, oh, I just had to hit rock bottom. But there's something there that hit rock bottom that wakes up and says, oh, look, it didn't kill me. I might have landed in jail, but it didn't kill me. And now I'm going forward into the light. Because the light is within us. The light is inextinguishable. And light wants more light. It doesn't want to be burdened with heaviness and chains. Okay, so these are all great questions. So Charles, you have a heart of gold, walk forward. Trusting in love, not trusting in the pain. Don't look at the outward circumstances when you're in the dark night of the soul, because again, that sinks you. Look at your heart and its resiliency. Okay. Let's see here. Here's another question. Boy, it's a fun one. Craig, what do you think about the law of attraction? Yeah, I think I just said the law of attraction. So light likes is a strange word. Light is attracted to more light. Is attracted to more light. Love wants more love. Grace wants more grace. Compassion wants more compassion. And so the law of attraction. You know, I'll just sum it up, you know, in a couple sentences here. We are made in the image and likeness of God. God is the ultimate creator. So we have the creative potential within us. So wherever you place your attention, that thing you are going to attract. So I'll just use a silly example. So the sacred number, you know, like the sacred number, the mala bead, you know, the mala is 108. It's a holy number. So I have this thing. I've driven across country many times. And, you know, every time I'm driving across country, whenever I go through a new state, you know, whenever 108 comes up, it just happens to catch my eye. The exit, the mile marker, you know, all the other exits and numbers, it's care less. Like I don't even look at them. But then boom, 108 just flashes in my eye. Once rented a moving van, and they gave me number 108, and thought, oh, look at this, you know, it's a divine moving van. You know, it's like you just start to see what you're attracted to. When I was a kid, I wanted to be liberated. I wanted to be free. So I dedicated my life to it. Could you call that the law of attraction? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm dedicated to freedom. So I took all my energy and I put it in that direction. And I must say it worked out pretty good for me. It worked out pretty good. And because freedom wants more freedom. Love wants more love. Truth wants more truth. I didn't have to go find my spiritual teacher. My teacher actually called for me. He said a prayer for me. I didn't say a prayer for my teacher to discover my teacher. He told me he was looking for me. He placed an ad in a paper for a day laborer, and I showed up. A silly young kid, it's about 18 years old, purple big skater pants on, and bleached yellow dreadlocks, and looked about as wild and as crazy as you could imagine. And he took me and he straightened me out over 20 years, and he gave me what I wanted. I had this desire for freedom. Did I attract him? Did he attract me? It's like attracts like. So yeah, can we create? Absolutely. You know, if you want to really win the lottery, does this mean you're going to win the lottery? No, but you know, if you focus on finance because you're deeply attracted to finance, there's a good chance you're going to have more money than someone who focuses on you know, I don't know, dog racing or something. You know, so it's what kind of life do you want? And so we are made in the image and likeness of God. Just as God is vast, spacious peace, our consciousness is vast, spacious peace. Our consciousness also has a creative potential to it. Now, your consciousness, I could speak for an hour about this, but I'm going to try to wrap it up quick. Your ability to manifest is it can be directly sabotaged by your wound. So say, for example, if you have a massive unworthiness issue and you say, I want to be free, but truly, you're saying in your true heart, I want to be free, but your egoic heart has a gaping hole that says, I'm unworthy of freedom, I'm unworthy of love, then there's a problem there. It's you become very inefficient manifester. And so, anyways, then it's necessary to do healing work. So to the degree that you are self-empowered, you tend to be a much better manifester, if that makes sense. Okay. Here's another question. Craig, can I bother you with this question? Okay. Is pure consciousness conscious of itself by nature, or does it always need a carrier, a human, a spirit, a God, an entity? In other words, does consciousness need to create stuff in order to know itself? No, consciousness knows what it is. And is this the reason we are existing? No, the intelligence of the universe knows what it is. And from this place, out of boredom, I suppose, it created all of us beings. Life just loves creating. And so is consciousness conscious of itself? Yes. So again, I think that's a philosophical question, but I might just leave it at that. There's all these ideas in metaphysics that, he goes on to write. Therefore, consciousness wants us to be enlightened so that it can discover itself through us in an everlasting, ongoing process of infinite self-discovery through creation. Yes, so that part is true. So it's fun, just the same way like people like to go to the movies, because through each movie you see, you get to live out a life, you get to live out an incarnation. Okay, so let's see, here's another question. Why do I feel this stress to achieve, to be my best, to outperform others, and how do I stop it? That has to do with unworthiness. So one of the things I'm going to invite you to do, my friend, is just to stop. To stop. Stop outperforming others. And look into your heart and see that your heart is good, to see that it's pure, to see that it's divine. That breaks my heart to hear that. I feel stressed to achieve and to be my best, to outperform others. Great meditation for you would be to turn awareness upon itself in your heart, to allow the heart to see your heart. Instead of looking outward and comparing yourself to others, that's like the ultimate egoic insecurity, is comparing and then trying to be better. So instead of awareness going outward and comparing, can you allow the awareness to go inward and to see your beauty, to see your goodness, your innocence, that you're a child of the Most High. Fall in love with yourself. This is how you stop that. You fall in love with yourself and you see that you are absolutely divine. Whether you can shoot 3-pointers or shoot air balls all day. Whatever it is, don't outperform. Okay, that's a good question. Okay. Richard, I'll get to your question in a minute here. Let me see if I can get all these. Here's a question from someone who recently visited Mooji and had a powerful awakening. Craig, how do I individuate properly? I'm almost 26 now, and I think they write something like, I still receive money from my parents, and I'm, feel like, this desire to go live on my own, and I don't want to just stay here at Mooji's place and live at the guru's feet. I need to have a normal life and have a stable job and not be tied to my family's money or live at the feet of my Satguru. So ultimately, your Satguru should be inviting you to live your truth. The ultimate Satguru is your heart. It's the voice of your heart. And I think your heart is telling you this. So if you need support individuating, that can be a long and difficult process if we're really enmeshed in our family system. And so you could use probably some support from a qualified counselor, therapist, support person, and helping you, pull away, kind of chop some of those energetic ties between you and your family and get out on your own 2 feet. So the big thing is to gather all your energy up into the center, and then to work real hard, at your own job, making your own money, living your own path. And as you begin to live on your own 2 feet, then the question really becomes is, what's in my heart? What is my gift? What is my truth? And how can I live that in the world? And that's like a question that I would, that's the type of question I get in my daily sessions is, how do I live the truth? Not my family's truth, not my guru's truth. How do I live my truth? Which, going back to that totality question, is God's truth, because we are one and the same. The voice in your heart is the voice of the totality in the individuated form of you. And so, okay, I did good. I got through a bunch of questions. Mr. Richard, do you have a question for me?
Yeah, I do have a question for you.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just curious how to best navigate as as you're kind of coming in and things are very flat. But they're here and they're beautiful, but they're flat. And yeah, it's kind of hard to describe it. I figured that you would just pick it up.
Yeah, no, I get a sense of it right away. So if we're feeling flat, a great question is what's going on in my heart? What's going on in my heart? What's going on in my belly? Normally, if we feel flat, we're getting a little stuck in, say, non-dual states of peace, and it's not including the heart and the belly. And or there's some wound in the heart or the belly that's being subtly or not so subtly ignored or bypassed. Sometimes it's completely unconscious. And by completely unconscious, I mean sometimes literally the body hides things within it and doesn't let us see. And so if we feel really flat, sometimes I'll do some active inquiry. Like, what am I feeling in my heart? Nothing. What am I feeling in my heart? Nothing. What am I feeling in my heart? Deadness. What's this deadness about?
Craig, it's like a good flatness though. Like,
okay. Yeah, so tell me about good flatness.
Yeah, it's a great, I guess it's kind of what I'm like, so it's like coming in and it's like I'm just here. I'm just here. But it doesn't, and I guess that's the part of the problem with it is like, it doesn't seem to have lots of words. And when I'm really in it, I'm like speechless.
Okay, so see now here, Richard, I'm gonna correct you. So that I wouldn't describe as flatness. To me, that's something beautiful. It's simple. It's free. It's like the energy of, say, existence. It just is. And so, but when I feel into that, it's alive, it's radiant. So oftentimes if I feel that, I'll explore it and say, like, how big is this presence that I am? How big is this? You know, the ego can really, well, let me back up a little bit here. So one of the things that my teacher did with me is he made sure that we were able to speak about our experience. You know, and a lot of teachers discourage that because, you know, some people just get lost talking about, I had a spiritual awakening back in 1986. It's like, that's great. What's your experience right now? And see, when you're able to talk about your experience right now in this moment, you say, well, I'm having this energy and it feels flat. Okay. Well, is it really flat? Or is it big? Is it vast? Is there great freedom here? If there's great freedom here, then talk about that, like acknowledge that within your own experience. As you acknowledge it, you know, going back to that law of attraction question, the more you acknowledge something, the more it grows. So if I look at something, say, oh, this is flat, boom, the ego labels it and says, okay, I'm done with that. Doesn't really go into it much more. But if we look at an experience like you just described, and you feel this simplicity, and there's freedom in it, there's emptiness in it, there's just a very quiet sense of love in it. You know, as you begin to, you know, with discernment, acknowledge what's actually here, your experience grows and it becomes more full. But if the ego doesn't have language for it, you know, like I've had people come into my office before and they had language of mental illness. You know, they came in and they said, well, I'm disassociated. And I'm like, well, tell me what your experience is like. Well, I feel really spacious and really empty. And I just feel like I'm as big as the sky. Like, well, that kind of sounds like a spiritual awakening. That doesn't sound like disassociation. Well, the last psychologist I went to, they said it was disassociation. Well, you know, if you put the wrong label on something, you know, your mind can quickly close a door on your experience. But when you acknowledge what's happening, the thing starts to open up. It comes more fully forward. Does that make sense, Richard?
Yeah, it does. And you know, I think that with the flatness, I wasn't. It didn't have a negative connotation for me, but I can appreciate where you're coming from. And I don't take my ego, the labeling, the compulsive labeling of my mind too seriously these days.
Good.
But I'm really appreciating what you're having to say around acknowledging it and really being in it and investigating it more.
Beautiful.
What is this? So that was, thanks, Craig.
Yeah, no, of course, because, you know, whatever you investigate, it will grow. And what you'll find is, you know, like a lot of times people come to me, they say, well, I'm stuck in the void. And I'm like, well, let's open to the void. Let's explore it. And they're like, oh, no, there's nothing here. It's like, no, let's take a look around. When we start opening into the void, you see how vast the void is. And you give yourself permission to surrender into the void. It's like, oh, I can get comfortable with this. But if you just look at the void and call it the void and, you know, just, you know, have some kind of egoic response that I'm this small being in relationship to the void, you know, then we really, you know, we can really suffer. But with any experience as you explore it, I often refer to these as heaven realms, as whatever your experience is, when you explore it, it opens into a whole realm. You know, a whole realm of divinity. And oftentimes, I'll say this too, because often when people speak about things, or they use the word flat, they feel like they get to a place and they're just here, just like in this one state. And maybe it doesn't have overwhelming bliss or joy or kundalini or whatever, but oftentimes the intelligence of God is often she brings us into one state and just floods us with that for months at a time. Whereas in the past, our experience may be quite varied. We may have ego and then a really good day and then ego, then a spiritual awakening, then back to ego. But sometimes we get into a state where it just opens up. And people feel like, God, I'm just in this. And it just kind of feels like flat. But oftentimes God is wanting us to become foundational in this. To grow some roots here. To claim this and say, this is me. Like, this is my truth. Not my ego, but my divine nature, my soul. And as you embody it fully and claim it, then it becomes a part of you that can never leave. So the isness that you're describing, then it becomes something that can never leave. And the more you acknowledge that, the more power it has. But again, if we don't acknowledge it, then oftentimes what we find is we become one of these people who just goes in and out of states, but they don't have any mastery because they've never claimed it. Does that make sense?
Very thankful, Craig. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Yeah. And forgive me, Richard, for misunderstanding your question in the beginning.
I don't know. That's the communication game.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, a lot of times people think flat as, like a soda pop that's no longer good anymore. Like, this thing's flat. I don't like it. Oftentimes people, when they say flat, they complain, but, I get a greater sense of it. And me, I've gotten accustomed to having so much grace and so much like multi-dimensional stuff happening in my consciousness. Sometimes when I have an experience like what you're describing, just being flat, it's just like isness coming into me, being me. It can confuse me for a moment, but when I start to explore it and relax and surrender into it, it's like a breath of fresh air because it's so utterly foundational, so essential to our being. And, especially if, like going back to Charles' question of the dark night of the soul, when we have connected to some of these foundational aspects of our consciousness, and then say, for example, we are thrown into an experience like the dark night, we are less rattled because we know there is something here that is unmovable. It's immovable within me. There's this presence that even the dark night of the soul cannot destroy. And so, I encourage you to truly claim this, Richard, because, and it may even sound silly because when it's an essential quality, it feels like it's the very fabric of your nature. But just to really honor and say, yes, I know this fabric. I know it's indivisible from my consciousness. And to claim it. And more as we claim these things, a sense of mastery comes forward that is so helpful here on planet Earth. Because if we live on planet Earth without mastery, well, we tend to just ping pong ball all over the place. So anyways, so nice to see Richard, and truly everyone who came. It's been so nice to be here tonight. Thank you all for your donations, your support, and I'll be back. I'll be here Wednesday night on the Zoom class, and then again for Satsang next Sunday. So may peace be with you all, and have a wonderful night. Good night, everyone.